Hello, everyone. I'm so pleased that you are with us. I'm Kevin Crane, and we are joined by two great guests today. Arvind Jha is Global Head of Product for NewGen Software, and Chandra Surbat is Vice President and Global Head of Digital Experience at Wipro. And we're here talking about accelerating digital transformation across the enterprise with content services. Now, gentlemen, welcome to the show today. The pandemic has changed the need for operational excellence and for developing new ways of working, especially to address the empowerment of remote workers and more flexible access to content. Now, Chandra, what were some of the limitations in traditional enterprise content management systems that were exposed during the last couple of years or so?
Thanks, Kevin, for having me, and great to see you, Arvind. And I hope we'll to have a great conversation in the next 30, 40 minutes. Kevin, to answer your question, of course, pandemic has really changed things. And while we could think of it as limitations, it also accelerated a couple of things which enterprises need to do. The first and foremost, the entire omni-channel accessibility of the content is number one priority. Given the pandemic, your partners, customers, employees are all remote. The seamless ability to access across all channels the relevant content services that are needed is important in the pandemic remote world. That's one limitation or need which has come in the as part of the pandemic, and we see organizations significantly accelerating their journey to make their content services as omnichannel as possible to continue to be relevant in this remote world. The second, we also noticed, given that the context of the pandemic and remote work, to support all of the interactions and experience services which the employees, partners, and their customers have with the enterprise, the need to drive more intelligent, whether it's about onboarding, contract management, or even the loan originations, dispute resolutions, any of those services, self-service options which are more remote. So to make sure that the intelligence part of the content is paid more attention to, more cognitive, is another area where the customers are investing. These two, Kevin, to me, omni-channel accessibility across all channels in a seamless way, more and more intelligence to the content, are the two things which enterprises are investing in, and these are accelerated by the pandemic.
Interesting point. Now, Arvind, in the past 2 years, it hasn't been all bad news. As Chandra has been saying, a number of technologies and approaches have accelerated as a result. Omni-channel and putting intelligence into processes are some of the goals. What are some of the technologies and trends gaining prominence that we should be aware of and adopt that will help make a difference and fuel our recovery in 2022?
Sure. And let me add my thanks for having me here as well, and look forward to the chat. And Chandra is absolutely right on both the trends that he pointed out. I would say that what we saw was that the first reaction to the pandemic was just like react and quickly figure out what to do and how to support the customers and how to support the employees. But as people have gone on to see that this is going to be an extended period, and we all have to work remotely, we have to work with a hybrid mode, they've quickly figured out that they need to have three major, I would say, changes in their approach to content. One is a lot of us were looking at content as a backend, primarily a backend function or an operational functional for employees. That has moved to the front end because everything is going self-service, remote, and customer experience, as Chandra was trying to say, has become a paramount kind of thing. So we see that there is a digital twin version of the content that is moving from the backend operations work, whether it is ID cards or whether it is KYC documents, whether it is loan submission documents, any document that you submit, the customer wants it to be smartly handled, and which is what Chandra was trying to say, that you need to process it quickly with some kind of intelligence. The other big trend that we see is that, as an internal function, we were looking at maybe 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 users, but people had to now look at putting 20,000 users, 30,000 users on a content management system. And then once they had time to assemble this out and absorb this, and now they understood that everything that they thought was good to have is now become critical. Now we are seeing 200,000 kind of users, and just recently we had some requests coming in saying, can you put 5 million of my consumers on your platform so that we can serve their needs much better? So I think these three things And then because of those three things, it must get integrated with everything that you have in the system. So every workflow, every workbench, every little application that you have, we are seeing that our content services platform gets integrated with 70 to 100 plus different applications in enterprise. This is the acceleration, the 10x acceleration that the pandemic is driving for a lot of enterprises. So I totally agree with Chandra on his two top trends.
Well, one trend that has been greatly accelerated was already a trend, but now essential in many ways, is the move away from traditional on-premise systems and especially on-premise enterprise content management systems to cloud native content service platforms. Chandra, why is this important? And specifically, how is existing content being moved to the cloud and made available within new systems that is making a difference?
Good question, Kevin. And as we look at these few areas that I pointed out and Arvind pointed out, for organizations to deliver this seamless experience for the remote working situations, the traditional on-premise content management systems cannot provide that UI, which can be seamlessly with a rich experience accessible across channels. So architecture needs to start being viewed differently, needs to be more around cloud native. It needs to be more around microservices architecture, headless UI. Those set of capabilities which organizations needs to think through from their content management platform standpoint, so that these are made more consumable services for different channels and different applications. So that's one of the need what we see from organizations moving to the cloud platforms. And especially for them to provide these different capabilities of even a bank, for example, to provide their entire banking services on a digital platform. The whole contract management or onboarding solutions that I talked about earlier, any of these services to be made available, if it is cloud native, either it is as a custom development. You asked about what the organization should do to move. It could be about custom development, leveraging cloud native and the product vendor platforms from an organization standpoint. It could be also about moving the content onto cloud, and a lot of product vendors, product platforms, I'm sure Arvind is going to talk about Newgen as well, provide that capabilities for moving those content to the cloud. That's what we see in enterprises. Enterprises want to think through their cloud strategy. They want to think through from a richness of the experience standpoint. They want to think through these content capabilities to be made as consumable as possible so that you can serve them up to any of the customer experience needs and make it more seamless. When you think from a cloud standpoint, it's a real possibility. And it calls for a couple of things: evaluate their current infrastructure, current investments, current limitations of customer experience that they encounter, and look at these set of current investments to be moved to cloud, as well as think differently when they are investing in the new initiatives.
Now, most organizations have multiple systems, multiple legacy systems, multiple business workflows that are integrated with content and other repositories. And Arvind, one barrier to moving the cloud has always been the perceived complexity and cost of integration. How are companies dealing effectively with existing integrations when migrating to content service platforms?
Yeah, again, that's a great question and a great insight that you have. The cost of moving away from some of the legacy applications, both in terms of the actual capex cost as well as in terms of time and effort, is significant. A lot of companies unfortunately found out that their legacy systems would not allow the remote access, would not allow integrations with new applications that they were supposed to build, would not scale because a lot of the customer demand or the employee demand scaled up tremendously during the pandemic. They lost out actually. And I would say that, we thought that people would move much faster in terms of migrating from existing legacy application to the new cloud modern applications. But we only saw that new applications were actually moving to the cloud. A lot of our customers, they adopted our platform because we were cloud native. We had all these integrations with different parties. We had an integration layer. We also had a little low code application development capability that integrated with the content so they could churn out PPP loans much faster than what other could be. But I think a lot of the vendors also have to take responsibility because we have not created enabling mechanisms for customers to move faster. We've not built the transition components. We've not created enough tools in moving the metadata into a single repository, having a federated search, which is top class, providing some kind of mechanism where the best content is available and that is moved to a low cost storage. One of the factors we saw is that the video content has grown significantly as video KYC, video recordings, video conversations, video legal has become the flavor of the season. But the video is not being managed in a low cost or more cost optimized way. But I think increasingly now enterprises are looking at the pain points that they've had because of legacy. Now they're looking to us in terms of our platforms as well as platforms that we are working together with our partners such as Wipro and Chandra's team, and saying how can we give them that comfort that we can get them to the modern application infrastructure, modern content services platform without too much of a pain point and without losing out on whatever benefits they already had with a legacy application. I think we still have to do some work in that area. Okay.
We are speaking with Arvind Jha, Global Head of Product for Newgen Software, and Chandra Surbat, Vice President and Global Head of Digital Experience at Wipro. Now, as Arvind is talking, I'm thinking to myself, I'm a change agent. I still need to sell and justify my ideas or my strategies for change. Chandra, now we've been talking about legacy content management systems holding enterprises back, but the cost of that migration to modern cloud-based systems is not small. How should enterprises evaluate the ROI against the investments needed?
No, I think a couple of things, Kevin, as Arvind pointed out, the product vendor capabilities and that's one dimension of it in terms of making it seamless to move. The second is from a Wipro standpoint, consulting to the clients, providing few consultative approaches on what should be their new age architecture, what should be their customer experience strategy, what should be their customer service strategy. But if you think about it, while there is definitely a conversation on ROI, let's look at it in two different dimensions. What's the cost of not doing it? Cost of not doing it. Today, we are in an experience economy. It's no longer a product or a service as a differentiator for an organization. That's considered hygiene. So in an experience economy, if we don't drive customer experience transformation, for which content, seamless and a consistent availability of it in an intelligent fashion, like we spoke earlier, across all channels, because customer is going to switch channels based on their priority. They're going to decide their customer journey as what they wish. They pick up the journey wherever they want to pick up and in whichever channel which they want to pick up. So ability for organizations to be relevant for the consumers in this frictionless channel strategy, if you were to think about it, is very critical. So cost of not doing legacy migration to cloud is clearly your customer experience drop. And that customer experience drop in today's context is significant because that's where either customer sticks with you or moves away from you purely from an experience standpoint. The other thing the organizations also start thinking is about there is a lot of cost when you are an on-premise, in addition to dropping experience purely from an IT standpoint, the infrastructure, the storage, the licensing models, and the legacy maintenance, the skills that are needed to sustain those legacy platforms are also part of the cost, which is not adding value, but continues to be consumed. Now, as you move to cloud, there are a couple of other gains that can help your ROI. One is automation. Think from the standpoint of different automation scenarios that can be implemented, which will give you gain from removing the manual intervention, from having more and more back office support that can be removed, and which in turn will also drive the experience. And the other aspect of making these gains can be from an actionable insights that can be provided, analytics that can be provided, through these cloud native solutions, which will also give better insights, better business decisioning capabilities, which is another gain. So we need to think through from a larger aspect of what are we losing if we don't make this move? What are we gaining if we make this move? And that's what we do, Kevin, help customers do a consultative approach and provide a step-by-step process on realizing these gains and as well as making them futuristic ready.
Now, Chandra, as Arvind mentioned earlier, in any organization, there is a growing amount of content that kind of typically falls outside the scope of what we would consider content management or information governance. These are things like video and audio, even text messages, team chats, and so forth. What can and should organizations do to better manage this content?
That's a great question. And I think the first and foremost organizations needs to think through from their information management and archival strategy or an archival platform. You talked about the growing, and Arvind talked about the significant amount of the growth of the content, as especially the remote working scenario where we are creating and consuming a significant amount of content. So this set of different contents through the strategy of archival platform or information management, we can seamlessly move them off to an archival storage or archival scenarios. And that is one part of what organization needs to think through. That includes even videos, audio clips, AI, ML based voice text, different this set of contents that needs to move. How do you automatically tag them and annotate them, and so that they can be easily made available, searchable, and provided when needed. At the same time, you have a strategy to store them. So these are some of the services that cloud as well as the product vendor platforms today provide seamlessly, Kevin, and that's something that needs to be thought through from the organization standpoint. And we see that significantly in our conversations with the clients. Archival strategy is one of the key strategies that we help them. We help them look through the entire content pieces that are getting created today, and how do they need to handle that through an archival strategy.
Arvind, how is NewGen helping with all this, dealing with these new content types? Any new features that are being offered that help with all of this?
Absolutely. But before I get there, I totally agree with Chandra that the consulting part of the engagement is the key,
Okay.
And, really leaning on our global SIs to provide that consulting services so that they can take advantage of all the new features and capabilities in the platform.
Indeed, it's a synergy of the thought process and the tools used.
Absolutely. So to be able to handle this growing exponential need of both digital as well as messages, as you said, team chats, even social media messages, people have started using instant messengers, WhatsApp in some nations, for example. We've now built new capabilities, almost like a new microservices, cloud native based content services APIs that allows you to store videos at a very, very low cost, but gives you all the goodness of all the rights management, all the access management, and all the integration capabilities. So you can actually integrate, as Chandra was saying, annotations, summarization, search, smart search, within those videos. So even things like if you have a conversation with a team's chat video, and you want to see in which video, which particular topics were mentioned, you can do those kind of searches from within our new system. We also store high velocity messaging. So, enterprises are also doing a lot of communication through SMS or through WhatsApp or through instant messengers or through some kind of notification channels. We like to keep an archive of that so that the customer can see almost like a passbook of all the messages, all the message interactions that they've had with that particular enterprise. It builds loyalty, and then loyalty obviously translates into more revenue as we go along. We also think that as we go along, we'll start seeing more need for storing business objects. So we are looking at all the new databases that are coming along and integrating all the database capabilities within our API set so that you can have the best of breed of everything. You can have a hybrid system, you can have a cloud system, you can have a legacy content store, you can have the modern content store, but you have a single dashboard to be able to access all of that. So we have invested in creating these new tools for some of these new content that we are seeing enterprises generate.
Chandra, can you give us an example of how this plays out in the real world? An example of one organization or one use case that you feel has been successful using these approaches? What did they do? What were the results, and how can we do it too?
Great. We are doing it for multiple use cases and multiple customers, Kevin. And let me take one of the examples. For one of the global health regulatory organization, which wanted to look at in this current health scenario, they wanted to bring together their health bulletins much more faster and much more real time and in a collaborative fashion. And time is of essence in these scenarios. And what we did with them through a consultative approach, we looked at 2-3 things that we wanted to do to support their business case or use case. So we looked at a common set of services for discovering, collecting, classifying, retaining all types of information which are necessary for creating this knowledge repository on a continuous basis. That's the first thing. Second thing, we looked at the research types, the different research teams that existed, and looked at how do we support them from providing a collaborative and in a collaborative fashion, the entire set of different content that is needed for them to orchestrate this co-creation. So that was the second thing. And this collaborative platform connects into this knowledge repository to support that need. The third thing, we looked at the user interface through which the research scholars across the globe who needs to collaborate will access this information for a specific research mission. So what it ensured is the ability for the entire collaborative fashion in which the research scholars, depending upon the specific set of teams that they were organized into, accessing this content and collaboratively co-creating it and making sure that they can help complete this document with the real-time information and with all of different inputs that are needed to make it very rich and relevant and timely, is what the platform achieved. And we looked at few things. We looked at what was the right set of technology platforms, the information tagging that was needed, annotation, categorization, and classification, all of that different elements that goes into making this into success. I think if you look at from the client standpoint, the business adoption of any of these systems will depend on how easy and faster that we can develop, and a seamless and a rich UI that we can provide access to the right information content, which will help the employees in this case, and as well as the research associates who are distributed, to get their work done effectively. And that core ability to service as their needs is what really drove the business adoption. So that's one of the interesting use cases that we have seen, Kevin.
We are speaking with Chandra Surbat, Vice President and Global Head of Digital Experience at Wipro, and Arvind Jha, Global Head of Product at NewGen Software, about accelerating digital transformation across enterprises with content services. Now, Arvind, I know that there will be some excellent links in the description below for some resources we want to point our viewers and listeners to, but what should our listeners do to take action today?
A great question. I think a lot of listeners would be interested in knowing how to move out of a legacy transform into a cloud transformation system. So I think with Wipro, we have some joint collateral, and the link below will give them some kind of starting point in terms of how they can start looking at transition, what kind of consulting services Wipro is able to provide, what kind of product capability NewGen is able to provide, and how they could start to map out a transition. May not take 1 or 2 quarters, but over the next 3 or 4 quarters, as Chandra was saying, just the cost of maintaining legacy and status quo. And by the way, co has already lost status, I believe, so they should move on to the new cloud-based systems as soon as possible. We can also help them with some of the new emerging demands around video or high velocity short messaging needs that they have with customers. NewGen, as you know, is one of the highest rated content services platform by both Gartner and Forrester. And we have been serving customers for 30 plus odd years. Very, very large number of customers. We have very high scalability and proven competency in that area. So they're welcome to contact me either on my social media feeds or via your offices. We'll be happy to have a chat with them and tell them and bring in Wipro wherever needed to kind of design a good solution for them. But I do think that I think most enterprises are now looking at this very actively, and we see that the budgets are healthy. And in the next 2 or 3 years, we will see a significant amount of movement in this space.
Well, Arvind and Chandra, it's been great speaking with you today. We're almost out of time, but before I let you go, both of you, I have one final question for both of you. What is one thing that executives and technologists should be thinking about now and strategizing for today in order to be prepared for the world in 5 years' time? Chandra, your thoughts?
Sure. If I had to say one thing, Kevin, it's for the content-centric business processes, which is what most of the businesses today have. They need to start thinking about not just as enterprise content management, it's intelligent content management as a service. Now, this does a couple of things. There is intelligence in it, which means that we can significantly transform the consumer experience through the automation, and which does two things. It also cuts cost for organizations and drives the experience. We need to think from the new age consumers as someone who is more interested in self-service. So the intelligent content management as a service concept enables composable way, cloud native, cloud first strategy, and then look at making it as cognitive and as intelligent as possible. So organizations are prepared for the future in terms of making it as applicable and relevant to stitch a very dynamic customer journey mapping, and as well as making it frictionless from a channel standpoint. And to Arvind's earlier point, I also want to really mention the great partnership that we have with NewGen, and it's been a good amount of different service offerings, capabilities that we have stitched together. I'm sure there are some exciting collaterals that will be made available, and as well as feel free to contact me or Arvind. We'll continue to have this dialogue on how do we help organizations in this strategy.
Arvind, what should we be thinking about now and strategizing for in order to be prepared for the world in 5 years' time?
I think Chandra makes some really, really good points in terms of what executives should be thinking about. I will say a little bit, differently. One of my bosses used to say that, in our business, never think 5 years out of ahead of time, because things are changing very rapidly, very dynamically. But I do see that, this digital transformation, the need for hyper automation across every touch point, whether it's intelligent automation or automation at scale, or marrying, physical IoT type of devices with digital kind of processes, that is growing rapidly. And already we can see that our customers who have been early adopters are getting much higher ROI and much leadership position in their dominant markets than other customers who are lagging behind. So my appeal to, or my recommendation to executives would be, look at hyper automation, look at leveraging AI, look at leveraging natural language processing, whether it is in text or in voice or in pattern recognition or in images or in video. I think with digital technology, we can do a lot for our customers right now. And I think if we are all customer obsessed, our businesses will have the benefit that we all see.
That is Arvind Jha and Chandra Surbat. Arvind, Chandra, thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thanks, Kevin, for having me, and great conversation with you and Chandra. Chandra, thanks so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Kevin and Arvind. It's been a great conversation.
Very good. Until next time, I'm Kevin Crane. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.